Theme of this year's United Nations General Assembly, currently gathering in New York, is the post-2015 development agenda, of course. On Friday, world leaders gathered to endorse the 17 new goals, including ending poverty and hunger and quality education for all by 2030. While achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is goal number 5 on that list. Our U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease caught up with the Executive Director of UNWomen to talk about this goal's significance in the world's new development agenda.
Now by the Executive Director of UNWomen, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Madam Executive Director, busy time for you. What was your reaction to the adoption of the SDGs, a standalone goal, Goal 5, for the empowerment of women and women's equality by 2030?
The adoption of SDG was an important moment for the people of the world because nations agreed to the most comprehensive program for ending poverty, for gender equality, for ending wars, and for make sure that we have economies that work for all the people as much as we can. And it was completely different from what we had in the MDGs.
Let's talk a bit about that. What is the difference between Goal 3 to promote women's equality in the MDGs and Goal 5 in the SDGs?
Well, in the goal that we have now, it is much more comprehensive. It covers ending violence against women. It covers participation and representation of women in the economy as well as in politics. It covers unpaid care work, reducing it and redistributing it. It covers also ending cultural practices that are harmful to women, and it names the ending of child marriages as well as the ending of female genital mutilation. It also covers the importance of using technology to facilitate the implementation of all these goals, and it also covers the end of all forms of discrimination, which means that changing many of the laws that still remain in the statutes of many countries that discriminate against women and girls.
We heard a lot about implementation of the very laws you talk about from a group of high-level politicians that you managed to get into one room to recommit themselves to the Beijing Platform of Action this past weekend. Were you happy with some of the commitments? I know that China is donating $10 million to UNWomen. That must have put a smile on your face.
Well, I was happy because I need means of implementation. The fact that many countries talked about gender-responsive budgeting as an approach that they're going to adopt, the fact that they called on collaboration with private sector, but also the fact that as they were announcing what they were going to do, they were talking about things that they were going to do themselves. They were not asking for money from us and from the international community in all cases. And of course, I was also glad that those countries that are donors were talking about engendering their ODA, the fact that many countries talked about support for women in conflict areas, for women, peace and security, and that they would actually support women who are living in areas where there is wars, where there is no education, and where there is extreme violence and terrorism against women.
One of the highlights of that event was listening to Mama Gertrude Mongella, who was Secretary General of the 4th Women's Conference held in Beijing, where that platform of action was adopted. She gave delegates attending that seminar homework. She said, stop the wars and let's get that done. What did you think of her contribution?
Well, you know, in addition to having had about 70 heads of states spending from 9 to 4 p.m. talking about women and girls and what needs to be done, to then hear a veteran like Mama Gertrude almost talking like a mama, and saying that in our generation, we gave you a platform, we gave you an agreement, and now we want you to implement it and stop the wars. That for me was very important.
She also spoke about a zero policy against violence for women, which continues to be a big issue universally. I mean, that was an important point she made.
That was very important. What was also important was that not only did she emphasize that when the heads of states came up to speak, the majority of the heads of states that were identifying priorities for their country, ending violence against women was the biggest priority. So clearly, this is a big issue everywhere.
Another stalwart of the movement was Africa's first female head of state, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, and she spoke about a policy where rapists won't get bail while they await trial in her country. Is that the sort of commitments you want to hear from government?
I wanted to hear something extraordinary because we're saying that in the MDGs or even in the Beijing Declaration, we gained the experience of what what needs to be done. We know that business as usual will not work. We do need these almost radical approaches and in the implementation of the commitments that are made, because otherwise, if we take baby steps, we will not eradicate the significant violation of women's rights that we still see in the majority of countries.
What people don't know is that the MDGs didn't provide as firm deadlines like the SDGs are. By 2030, you want to have 50-50. You want to have the equality of women, the empowerment of women. When we're standing here in 15 years, do you think we'll have achieved all of that? Why are you optimistic?
When I'm standing here as a gogo, a real gogo now, more gogo than I am now, I would want to see a world in which a girl who's born today, who will be 15 years old, doesn't have to think about the things that the little girls are thinking about now. I am optimistic because yesterday, on Sunday, I brought together heads of states, the highest citizen in every land, and all of them were saying that this is the time to end all these injustices on women and girls. And also, we have so much experience now about how to do it, what needs to be done, and what the gaps are. We have no excuse.